3 weeks before my barbershop turned to ash, life felt steady, like the hum of clippers on a busy afternoon. I'd built Thompson's Cuts from nothing, a little brick spot on Peachtree Street in Atlanta, where folks came for a trim and a laugh, where the air smelled of pomade and second chances. At 68 I moved slower, but my hands still danced with scissors, shaping fades and edges like I'd done for 40 years. That day, the sun hung low, casting gold through the windows, and my regulars filled the chairs, swapping stories about jobs and kids. Old man Reggie, with his salt and pepper beard, was mid-joke about his grandson's basketball tryouts, when the bell above the door jangled hard, cutting him off. 2 cops strode in, boots thumping the worn linoleum, their shadows stretching long across the floor. The taller one, Officer Grant, stood over 6 feet, broad as a linebacker, his buzz cut so tight you could see scalp gleam beneath it. His mirrored sunglasses hid his eyes, but the smirk curling his lips told me plenty. Beside him was Officer Tate, shorter, wiry, maybe 25, with twitchy fingers and a rookie's unease, like he'd rather be anywhere else. The room went quiet, clippers buzzing alone in my grip, every head turning slow, wary. I kept sweeping, stray hair into a pile, pretending their stares didn't prickle my neck. Grant cleared his throat, voice gravelly like he smoked 2 packs a day, and barked, "Business license now." I straightened, brushing dust off my apron, and met his gaze through those reflective lenses. "Afternoon to you too," I said. Calm as Sunday morning, setting the broom against the counter. "What's this about?" Tate shifted, boots squeaking, and mumbled something about a robbery tip a few blocks over, his words tripping over each other like he didn't believe. "Them." Grant didn't flinch, just jutted his chin toward me, repeating, "License." I walked to the wall where the framed permit hung, yellowed but legal, signed by the city 20 years back. My fingers brushed the glass as I unhooked it, feeling the weight of every eye in the shop. Reggie coughed, low and deliberate, a signal to stay cool. I handed it over, and Grant snatched it, holding it up like he was inspecting a counterfeit bill. His smirk widened, teeth glinting, and he tossed it onto the counter with a clatter, letting it skid into a stack of combs. "This dump's a front, right?" he said, loud enough for the street to hear, his voice dripping with something sour, something that wasn't just suspicion. The word stung, sharp and old. A blade I'd felt since I was a girl in Alabama, dodging glares on buses and lunch counters. My regulars stiffened, chairs creaking, but nobody spoke. Tate stared at the floor, picking at his belt, while Grant stepped closer, boots inches from my pile of swept hair. I squared my shoulders, 68 years of backbone holding me up. Anne said, "Been cutting hair here longer than you've been alive, officer. You got a tip, fine, check it out, but this?" I nodded at the license, now smudged from his grip. "That's real." His smirk didn't budge, but his eyes narrowed, behind those shades, sizing me up like I was prey that wouldn't run. "Funny," he said, leaning in, his breath hot with coffee and spite. "Old lady like you running a place like this? Bet you're hiding something." The room held its breath, clippers still humming in my hand, a lifeline to normal I wouldn't. "Drop." Reggie shifted, his knuckles whitening on the armrest, but I shot him a look, quick and firm, "Keep still." Tate piped up, voice cracking, "Just routine, ma'am. We're, checking the area." His words fell flat, a kid reciting lines he didn't write. Grant ignored him, circling me now, his bulk blocking the light from the window. "Robbery tip, huh?" I said, crossing my arms, apron crinkling. "What did they steal then?" "Hair gel." A chuckle rippled through the shop, soft but defiant, breaking the ice. Grant's jaw ticked, and he stopped pacing, planting himself square in front of me. "You think this is a game?" he growled, voice low, meant for me alone. I didn't. Blink, didn't step back, though my pulse thrummed hard in my ears. "I think you're wasting my time," I said, steady as stone. "Got customers waiting." He leaned closer, close enough I could smell the sweat on his collar, and whispered, "Nigger like you don't belong here." The slur hit like a slap, raw and deliberate, stripping away the pretense of routine. My fingers curled tight around the clippers, metal warm against my palm, but I didn't flinch. I'd heard it before, carved into my skin by decades of men like him, men who thought power came from a badge and a word. Tate flinched, glancing at Grant like he'd crossed a line even he didn't expect, but he didn't speak. The shop was a tomb now, every breath held, every eye locked on us. I tilted my head, just enough to meet Grant's hidden gaze, and said, "You done? Or you got more to say?" My voice stayed firm, polite even, a shield I'd forged long ago. He straightened, smirk twitching, like he'd expected me to crumble, to beg, to run. I didn't, not yet. He took a step back, brushing imaginary dust off his uniform, and nodded at Tate. "Let's roll," he said, loud again, performative, like he'd won something. Tate scurried to the door, relief flooding his frame, but Grant lingered, staring me down one last time. "We'll be back," he said. A promise, not a threat, his boots scuffing my clean floor as he turned. The bell jangled as they left, and the shop exhaled, voices erupting in a rush, Reggie muttering "pigs" under his breath. I picked up the license, wiping his fingerprints off the frame, hands steady though my chest burned. I'd faced worse, I told myself. Setting it back on the wall, the glass catching the fading light. Customers shuffled, chairs squeaking, life creeping back in. I grabbed the clippers again, nodding at Reggie to sit, and started cutting. Blades, buzzing over his scalp, smooth and sure. But my mind churned, replaying Grant's smirk, that word, the way he'd tossed my license like trash. This wasn't random, wasn't routine. It was personal, a line drawn in my own shop, a challenge. I didn't ask for. I finished Reggie's fade, brushing clippings off his shoulders, and smiled, tight but real, like nothing had happened. "Next," I called, voice carrying over the chatter, pulling the room back to me. They didn't know it yet, but those cops had lit a fuse, one that had burned hotter than I could have guessed. Grant thought he'd rattled me, thought I'd shrink. He didn't know Clara Thompson, didn't know the fire I'd carried since I was 16, dodging billy clubs in Montgomery. I kept cutting, scissors snipping, each clip a quiet vow. I wouldn't break. Not for him, not for anyone. The day wound. Down, sun dipping below the skyline, and I locked up. The shop quiet again, my reflection staring back from the glass door. I thought it was over. Thought I'd held my ground and won. I was wrong. That moment, those two cops, they were just the start. A spark I didn't see growing into an inferno. 3 weeks later, I'd be standing in ashes, wondering how it all went so wrong, how a simple Tuesday turned into a war I never wanted. But that day, sweeping hair into a dustpan, I didn't know. I just knew I'd survived round one, and that was enough, for now. Those cops didn't just walk out of my barbershop that day. They left a stench clinging to the air, a mix of arrogance and hate that wouldn't fade with the jangle of the bell. Officer Grant's boots had scuffed my floor, his slur still echoed in my ears. And Officer Tate's nervous shuffle hadn't softened the blow. I'd kept my cool, scissors steady, finishing Reggie's fade like it was nothing, but inside, my blood simmered, 68 years of swallowed rage bubbling up. The shop buzzed back to life, chairs creaking, voices overlapping, but I felt their eyes on me, waiting for what I'd do next. I swept up, locked the door after the last customer, and stood there staring at the license Grant had tossed like garbage, my name in faded ink behind smudged glass. They wouldn't leave me alone, that much was clear. Grant's "we'll be back" wasn't an empty promise, it was a vow carved in spite. I'd faced men like him before, badges or not, fists or words, but this time felt heavier, like a storm I couldn't outrun. 2 days passed, quiet ones, clippers humming, sun spilling through the windows, but I knew better than to relax. Then it happened again. Thursday afternoon, shop half full, the bell clanging like a gunshot. There they were, Grant and Tate, strutting, and like they owned the place, Grant's mirrored shades glinting under the fluorescent lights, Tate trailing with that same twitchy unease. "Back for more?" I asked, voice sharp but steady, setting my comb down. Grant smirked, leaning on the counter, his bulk knocking a jar of brushes to the floor, glass shattering loud enough to hush the room. "License check," he said, like it was routine, like he hadn't already seen it. Tate mumbled something about procedure, but his eyes darted to the exit, a kid caught in a game he didn't start. I crossed my arms, apron stiff with dried pomade, and said, "You checked. Tuesday, it's on the wall, look." Grant didn't glance at it, just kept that smirk plastered on, stepping closer, his shadow swallowing the light. "New day, new rules," he said, voice low, taunting. "Show it, or we got problems." The shop went still, clippers dead in. Mid-air, Reggie's jaw tight, a kid in the corner clutching his backpack. I could have handed it over, played along, let them strut out with their egos intact, but that word he'd whispered, that slur, burned too deep. "What's the crime?" I asked loud enough for everyone to hear. "Cutting hair? Breathing?" Grant chuckled, a dry, ugly sound, and leaned in, breath sour against my cheek. "Keep talking, Grandma," he said. "See where it gets you." Tate shifted, muttering, "Just cooperate, ma'am." But it was weak, drowned by Grant's looming frame. I'd had enough, 68 years of cooperating while men like him stomped over my life, my dignity, my peace. My hand slid to my pocket, slow, deliberate, pulling out my phone, the cracked screen catching the light. Grant laughed, a bark that echoed off the walls. "Calling for backup, Grandma," he mocked, crossing his arms, daring me to try. Tate tensed, hand twitching near his radio, but I didn't rush, didn't flinch, just scrolled through my contacts, thumb steady as stone. I tapped Jade's name, my daughter, the U.S. Attorney General, and pressed the phone to my ear, eyes locked on Grant's smirk. It rang once, twice, then her voice cut through, sharp as a blade, calm as a judge's gavel. "Mama, you okay?" Jade asked. "No nonsense, no hesitation." I tilted my head, letting Grant see the shift in my face, the flicker of something he didn't expect. "Hey, baby," I said, light, conversational, like I wasn't pinned between two badges in my own shop. "Seemed to be having a little trouble. Here." Grant's smirk faltered, just a twitch, but I caught it, savoring the crack in his armor. "Where are you?" Jade asked, her tone hardening, a steel I'd heard her use on senators and crooks alike. "Thompson's Cuts," I said loud enough for the room. "Couple of officers stopped by asking for ID again, no reason given." A pause, then Jade's voice dropped low, lethal. "Stay there." I smiled, small but real, slipping the phone back into my pocket and turned to Grant, letting my gaze linger, slow and sure, long enough for doubt to creep into his stance. "Who are you calling?" he snapped, stepping back, his buzz cut catching the light. I didn't answer, just adjusted my apron, brushing glass shards off the counter, every move deliberate, every second stretching his unease. Tate's face paled, his fingers fumbling at his belt, but Grant held his ground, though his smirk was gone now, replaced by a frown, a flicker of something unsteady. 30 minutes crawled by, the shop frozen, customers whispering, Grant pacing like a caged dog, Tate glued to the wall. Then tires screeched outside, a black SUV pulling up sharp, doors slamming. Jade stepped out, tall, poised, her navy suit, crisp against the Atlanta heat, her deep brown eyes, my eyes, locking onto the scene like a hawk. She didn't rush, didn't shout, just walked in, heels clicking, presence swallowing the room whole. "Badge numbers," she said, voice flat. A command, not a request. Tate stammered his out. "Tate, 629, hands shaking as he scribbled it on a pad. Grant hesitated, jaw tight, then muttered, "Grant, 413, his shades slipping down his nose, revealing narrowed eyes. Jade took the paper, folding it into her pocket, her gaze slicing through them. "You're done here," she said, and it wasn't a suggestion. Tate bolted for the door, relief flooding his frame, but Grant lingered, staring me down, then Jade, like he could claw back control. Jade didn't blink, just nodded at the exit. He slunk off, boots dragging, the bell clanging behind him. The shop exhaled, voices erupting, Reggie clapping my shoulder. "That's your girl?" I nodded, chest swelling, thinking I'd won, thinking those cops were gone for good. Jade hugged me, quick but fierce, whispering, "I've got you, Mama." I believed her, felt the weight lift, scissors back in my hand, ready to cut again. But as she drove off, promising to dig into this, I caught a glimpse of Grant outside, leaning on their cruiser, staring back through the glass, his smirk creeping back. What did he see that I didn't? Could one call really stop men like him? Drop a comment with number 1 if you think Clara's strength deserves respect. Hit like if you're rooting for her fight, and subscribe because this clash is just heating up. Was Jade's power enough to end it, or did she just light a bigger fuse? Jade's SUV peeled out of the parking lot that Thursday, leaving a quiet that didn't last, her promise to dig into those cops ringing in my ears as I locked up Thompson's cuts for the night. I'd stood tall, 68 years of steel in my spine, thinking her badge numbers and sharp glare had sent Grant and Tate running for good, thinking I'd won a round against men who dared to spit hate in my own shop. The air felt lighter, clippers buzzing in my memory, Reggie's grin flashing as he'd said, "You showed 'em, Miss Clara." I walked home under a purple sky, 3 blocks of cracked sidewalks and sagging porches, my boots tapping a rhythm of triumph, my apron slung over my shoulder like a cape. Sleep came easy that night, the first time in days, dreams of my scissors slicing through hair, not fear. Friday morning broke bright, sun spilling over Atlanta, and I headed back to the shop, keys jangling, ready to cut again to reclaim my space. But when I turned the corner onto Peachtree, my stomach dropped, a cold fist squeezing my chest. The windows of Thompson's cuts were gone, jagged holes where glass should have been, shards glittering on the pavement like spilled diamonds. Red paint streaked the brick, letters tall and sloppy screaming, "Go back!" The words dripping like blood, pooling in cracks below. I stood there, boots rooted, breath shallow, the morning breeze carrying the sting of spray paint and broken dreams. My shop, my fortress, 40 years of sweat and soul defiled overnight. I stepped closer, glass crunching, and saw the door ajar, frame splintered where someone had kicked it in. Inside, chairs were tipped, mirrors cracked, my license frame shattered. On the floor, the paper torn in half. I knelt, fingers trembling as I picked up the pieces, the ink of my name smudged beyond repair. Who did this? Why now? My mind flashed to Grant's smirk, his parting stare through the glass, but I had no proof, just a gut that wouldn't quit. Neighbors trickled out, Mrs. Ellis from next door clutching her robe, gasping, "Lord, Clara, what happened?" I didn't. Answer couldn't, just kept staring at the wreckage, the red paint burning my eyes. A squad car rolled up, slow and deliberate, and out stepped a new face, Detective Rollins, a wiry white guy with a mustache too big for his thin lips, his badge glinting in the sun. He strolled over, hands in pockets, kicking glass aside like it was trash. "Heard about some trouble," he said, voice flat, eyes scanning the mess with a shrug. "Kids, probably. You know how they get." I stood, apron slipping to the ground, and said, "Kids don't write that." I pointed at the wall, the words glaring back, a slur I wouldn't repeat. Rollins glanced at it, then at me, his mouth twitching into something too close to a smile. "Can't say for sure," he said, pulling out a notepad, scribbling nothing. I could see. "File a report if you want, but don't expect much." He didn't ask questions, didn't dust for prints, just stood there, a wall of indifference in a wrinkled suit. I clenched my fists, nails biting my palms, and said, "This is my shop. Someone targeted me." He nodded, slow, like I'd told him the weather, and said, "Happens, clean it up, move on." Then he was gone, cruiser rumbling away, leaving me in the ruin. I called Jade, voice shaking as I told her, "They hit the shop, baby. Smashed it up, painted hate all over it." Her breath caught, then hardened. "I'm on it, Mama," she said. "Internal affairs'll tear into this." I hung up, staring at the mess, and grabbed a broom from the back, the only thing they hadn't touched. I swept glass into piles, the crunch loud in the empty street, then hauled buckets of soapy water, scrubbing the paint with a rag, red streaking my hands like I was bleeding. My arms ached. 68 years weighing heavy, but I didn't stop, wouldn't let them see me break. By noon, the wall was patchy, the words faded but not gone, a ghost of hate still clinging. I reopened Saturday, defiant, dragging chairs. From home, taping plastic over the windows, the shop limping but alive. Customers trickled in, Reggie first, his fade uneven from Thursday, saying, "You're tougher than they know, Clara." I smiled tight and cut his hair, scissors snipping. Through the quiet, each clip a small fight back. I thought I'd weathered it, thought Jade's fury would scare them off, Thought I could stitch my world back together. Closing time came, sun dipping low, and I locked up, stepping into the cool dusk, my shadow long on the pavement. That's when I saw it. My car parked across the street, windshield spiderwebbed, a brick sitting on the hood like a trophy. My breath hitched, legs carrying me over, glass crunching again under my boots. Tucked under the brick was a note, scrawled in black ink, "You'll pay." My heart thudded, loud and fast, drowning out the city hum. I turned, scanning the street, shadows shifting in doorways, but no one moved, no one spoke. This wasn't kids, wasn't random, it was a message, a blade pressed to my throat. I clutched the note, paper crumpling in my fist, and thought of Grant, his promise, his hate. Jade's call had rattled them, sure, but not enough, not nearly enough. I'd stood my ground, brought in the big guns, and this was their answer, a coward's strike in the dark. My shop was breathing again. Customers. Back, but now my car, my escape, was a wreck too. I walked home, 3 blocks feeling like 30, the note burning a hole in my pocket, my mind racing. How far would they go? What did pay mean? I'd survived worse, Jim Crow summers, fists on picket lines, but this felt different, sharper, a war I hadn't signed up for. I reached my porch, legs trembling, and sank into the swing, the creak loud in the night. Jade would fight, I knew that, her voice already echoing in my head, promising justice, promising fire. But standing there, glass still in my soles, paint under my nails, I wondered if justice was enough, if it could outrun men who'd rather burn me down than back off. I'd thought I'd won Thursday, thought Jade's shadow had chased them away. I was wrong, so wrong. And this was just the start, a jab before the real punch. The shop lived, I lived, but that brick, that note, they whispered something darker, something coming I couldn't yet see. I folded the note, tucked it in my apron, and stared into the dark, waiting, knowing round 2 was already here. That brick through my windshield, that crumpled note promising I'd pay, they stuck with me, sharp as glass in my boots, but I wouldn't let them win, not yet. Friday night after the vandalism, I sat on my porch swing, the Atlanta air thick, with summer heat, my hands still stained red from scrubbing hate off my shop's walls, and called Jade again, voice steady though my chest ached. "They're not stopping, baby," I said, folding the note tight in my fist. "Smashed my car too." Jade didn't pause, didn't flinch, her voice cutting through the line like a steel wire. "I'm ending this, Mama," she said. "Those 2 are done." I believed her. 68 years of knowing my girl, the U.S. Attorney General, who'd climbed from my kitchen table with law books to a desk that shook the country. Saturday, I dragged myself back to Thompson's Cuts, plastic flapping over. The broken windows, chairs upright again, and started cutting, scissors snipping through the quiet, each clip a middle finger to whoever thought they'd scare me off. Reggie showed up, then Mrs. Ellis, then half the block, their chatter filling the holes those cops had punched in my peace. Jade worked fast, a storm I couldn't see but felt brewing. By Monday, word hit the street. Grant and Tate were suspended. No pay, no badge, internal affairs tearing into their files like wolves. Tuesday, a kid from down the block, Jamal, barely 16 with a shaky phone camera, slipped me a clip he'd shot that Thursday, Jade's SUV rolling up, her voice slicing. Through Grant's smirk, their retreat caught raw and real. "Post it," I told him, and he did, 5 million views by Wednesday. The internet exploding with "Justice for Clara" hashtags, my name trending beside Jade's, a tidal wave I didn't expect. Thursday, neighbors swarmed Peachtree, signs, sharpied with "Stand with Clara" and "No More," their voices loud, fists raised, a wall of brown faces and a few white ones too, all glaring at the precinct 2 blocks over. I stood in my doorway, apron crisp, watching them chant, my chest swelling. 68 years of fighting boiling into this, a win I could taste. I grabbed my scissors, started cutting again, the shop buzzing louder than ever, folks spilling. In just to shake my hand to say, "You did it, Miss Clara." Reggie grinned, his fade fresh, saying, "They're gone, you're still here." I smiled, wide and real, thinking maybe he was right, maybe Jade's hammer had smashed their game for good. The news vans rolled in Friday, microphones shoved. At me, cameras catching the plastic windows, the faded paint scars, my steady hands snipping hair. "How's it feel to win?" a reporter asked, and I laughed, soft but sure. Feels like breathing again. Saturday I walked to the shop, head high, sun warm on my face, scissors swinging in my pocket, every step lighter, every glance from a neighbor a nod of pride. I thought I'd turned it around, thought those cops were buried, thought my shop, my life was mine again. Then Sunday hit, and the air shifted sour and heavy like a storm rolling in uninvited. I flipped on the TV, coffee steaming in my mug, and there he was. Vickers, the local news anchor with slick hair and a sharper tongue, his face filling the screen on Channel 7. "Clara Thompson," he said, voice smooth as oil, "a hero. To some, but is she what she seems?" My mug froze halfway to my lips, steam curling up as he leaned into the camera, eyes glinting. "Sources say she's a fraud, leaning on her daughter's power to dodge accountability, stirring trouble where there was none." My stomach twisted, coffee spilling as I set it down, the room tilting. He kept going. Was this a setup? A race card played for sympathy? Clips rolled, me sweeping glass, Jade's SUV, twisted into something ugly, something I didn't recognize. "A woman crying victim," he said, "while honest officers lose their jobs." I stood, fists clenched, 68 years of slurs and stares roaring back. But this was worse. This was public. This was my name dragged through mud I didn't make. Monday. The shop opened quiet. No crowd, no signs, just whispers and sidelong. Looks. My phone buzzed non-stop, texts from numbers I didn't know. "Race baiter, liar, you'll get yours," each one a knife twisting deeper. I scrolled online, hands shaking, and saw it, thousands of comments under Vickers's clip. "She's a con. Fire her daughter too. Trash using privilege." Privilege? Me? The woman who'd scrubbed floors to buy this shop? Who'd dodged billy clubs to vote? Who'd raised Jade on rice and grit? I slammed the phone down, glass screen cracking, and stepped outside, air thick with betrayal. Tuesday. A rock sailed through the plastic window, thudding on the floor. No note this time, just silence from the street. Customers stayed away. Reggie too. His chair empty, my clippers cold in my hand. I called Jade, voice raw. "They're turning on me, baby, all of them." She cursed, low and fierce. "Vickers is a snake, Mama, I'll handle it." I nodded, though she couldn't see, and hung up, staring at the shop. The victory I'd tasted now sour, rotting in my mouth. Wednesday. Threats piled up, voicemails, hissing slurs. "We know where you live. Watch your back." Each one louder, angrier. A mob I couldn't see but felt closing in. I cut one head that day, an old man too deaf to hear the news, his tip trembling in my palm. Thursday I stood alone, sweeping dust. The shop a ghost town, my smile gone, my fight flickering. Jade's win had suspended them. Sure, the video had rallied the block, but now? Vickers had flipped it, spun me into the villain, and the world believed him. 68 years, and I'd never felt smaller, never felt the hate hit this hard, this fast. I thought I was unstoppable, thought the tide had turned, but it crashed back, drowning me in lies I couldn't outrun. Drop a comment with number 1 if you think Clara's getting a raw deal from this smear. Hit like if you're mad as hell at Vickers' spin, and subscribe because this fight's about to get uglier. What happens when the crowd you lifted turns into the one that buries you? The venom from Vickers' hit piece clung to me like damp rot. 68 years of grit tested, as my shop sat empty, the buzz of clippers replaced by a silence that gnawed at my bones. Thursday faded into Friday, then Saturday, each day a ghost. Town on Peachtree Street, my regulars gone, scared off by threats or swallowed by the lies painting me as a fraud, a race baiter leaning on Jade's power. I swept the floor anyway, broom scraping linoleum, plastic flapping over the busted windows, my reflection in the cracked mirror, a shadow of the woman who'd stood tall a week ago. I wouldn't quit, wouldn't let them see me break. Not Grant, not Tate, not Vickers, not the faceless voices hissing slurs through my phone. Monday rolled in, humid and grey, and I unlocked Thompson's cuts, apron tied tight, scissors gleaming in my hand, ready to fight back with every snip. A few brave souls trickled in. Old man Harold first, his cane tapping the floor, saying, "I don't believe that trash, Clara, you're good people." I nodded, throat tight, and started his trim, blades buzzing soft against his scalp, the rhythm steadying my pulse. Mid-cut, the bell clanged harsh and loud, and Detective Rollins stormed in, his mustache twitching, eyes glinting with something ugly. 2 uniforms flanked him, radios crackling, their boots stomping my clean floor. "Clara Thompson," Rollins barked, voice sharp, "step away from the chair." I froze, scissors hovering, Harold shrinking back, his hands trembling on his cane. "What now?" I asked, setting the tool down slow, 68 years teaching me never to rush with cops like these. Rollins smirked, pulling a paper from his jacket, waving it like a flag. "Warrant," he said. "Drugs found in your bathroom right here." I laughed, a short, dry sound cutting through the tension. "Drugs I don't even smoke, Rollins, you know that." He didn't flinch, just nodded at the uniforms, who shoved past me, knocking Harold's cane aside, heading for the back. Customers stared, wide-eyed, a kid dropping his comic book, pages fluttering. I crossed my arms, apron crinkling, and said, "You're fishing, and you won't find nothing." Rollins leaned in, breath stale with tobacco, whispering, "Found it already, sweetheart, baggie of white powder tucked behind the toilet." My stomach lurched, a cold sweat prickling my neck, but I held his gaze, 68 years of knowing a lie when I heard one. "Planted," I said, loud enough for the shop. "You planted it, and I'll prove it." He chuckled, low and mean, and snapped his fingers. The uniforms returned, one dangling a plastic bag, white dust glinting inside, the other snapping, cuffs open. "Clara Thompson, you're under arrest," Rollins said, stepping back as the cuffs clicked cold around my wrists, metal biting my skin. Harold gasped, "She didn't do that." But they ignored him, dragging me past the chairs, my boots scuffing the floor I'd swept clean. Outside, a crowd gathered, phones up, filming as they shoved me into a cruiser, Rollins grinning like he'd bagged a prize. The station was a blur, jeers echoing down the hall as they paraded me past sneering cops, their voices thick with slurs. "Got her now. Junkie granny." They booked me, mugshot flashing, fingerprints smearing ink on my hands, 68 years reduced to a number on a file. I sat in a cell, concrete cold under me, staring at the bars, mind racing. This wasn't random, wasn't chance, it was Grant and Tate, Rollins too, hitting back harder after Jade's blow, turning my shop into their trap. I called Jade from the payphone, voice steady though my hands shook. "They framed me, baby. Drugs in the shop." Her silence was a storm brewing, then she said, "I'm there in 2 hours, Mama. Hold tight." I did, sitting still, replaying. Rollins' smirk, the baggie, the cuffs, knowing it was a lie but powerless behind bars. True to her word, Jade stormed in, suit crisp, eyes blazing, her presence parting the station like a blade through water. She slammed papers on the desk, voice low and lethal. "Release her now, evidence is garbage." The desk sergeant stammered. Keys rattling, and I was out, cuffs off, Jade's arm around me as we walked free, sunlight harsh after the cell's gloom. "Dropped," she said. "No case, it's too shaky, planted obvious." I nodded, rubbing my wrists, red marks fading slow, and laughed, a raw, wild sound. "They tried, baby, and failed." She hugged me, fierce, promising, "They'll pay for this." I strutted back to the shop Tuesday, head high, apron on, scissors swinging, cutting Harold's hair again, finishing what they'd stopped. The shop hummed, a few more faces trickling in, word spreading I'd beat the rap. I thought I'd dodged it, thought Jade's fire had burned their lie to ash, thought I could breathe again. Closing up, I swept the floor, glass free now, plastic still flapping, my shadow long in the dusk. A customer lingered, Mr. Green from 2 doors down, his fade tight, his voice low as he leaned in. "They're not done, Miss Clara," he whispered, eyes darting to the street. "Heard talk. They're mad as hell." I paused, broom still, my gut twisting, a chill creeping up my spine. He slipped out, bell clanging soft, leaving me alone with his words heavier than the cuffs had been. I locked up, stepping into the night. 3 blocks to home, my car still wrecked from that brick. The notes "You'll pay" echoing louder now. Jade had crushed their setup, sure, got me out in hours. But Mr. Green was right. I felt it. A shadow growing I couldn't shake. 68 years, and I knew men like Rollins didn't quit, didn't slink off quiet. This wasn't over, wasn't even close. It was a jab, a test, and the real hit was coming, something bigger, something I couldn't dodge with a phone call. I reached my porch, swing creaking, and sat, staring into the dark, scissors in my lap, waiting for the next blow, knowing it'd land harder, knowing they'd make me pay in ways I couldn't yet see. The shop lived, I lived, but that whisper, that chill, it promised a storm I wasn't ready for, a war they'd already planned, while I thought I'd won. Mr. Green's whisper stuck to me like tar, his warning about those cops not being done simmering in my gut as I walked home Tuesday night, scissors heavy in my pocket, the Atlanta air thick with a quiet that didn't feel right. I'd beaten their setup, walked free from that cell thanks to Jade, my daughter's steel bending their lies, and strutted back to Thompson's cuts like I owned the world, 68 years of fight pumping through me. Wednesday, I cut hair again. Harold's, Kane tapping a rhythm, a few more faces trickling in, their nods soft but real, a fragile thread of trust weaving back. I swept the floor, locked up late, the plastic over my windows rattling in the breeze, and thought maybe, just maybe, I'd held the line. 3 a.m. My phone jolted me awake, shrill and insistent, a number I didn't know flashing on the cracked screen. "Miss Clara," a voice rasped, thick with panic. "It's burning, your shop, get here." I bolted upright, heart slamming, 68 years no match for the dread clawing my chest. I threw on clothes, boots unlaced, and ran. 3. Clocks blurring past, the night air sharp with smoke before I even turned onto Peachtree. Then I saw it. Thompson's cuts ablaze, flames licking the sky, orange and wild, swallowing 40 years in gulps. Glass popped, walls groaned, the roof sagging as fire trucks screamed in, hoses blasting, water hissing against the inferno. I stood there, boots crunching ash, the heat searing my face, watching my life's work twist into a blackened skeleton, smoke choking the stars. Neighbors gathered, Mrs. Ellis sobbing, "Who'd do this?" But I knew, deep down, Grant's smirk, flashing in my mind, Rollins's chuckle echoing. Firefighters doused it, hours bleeding into dawn, and when the last ember died, all that remained was a shell, charred brick and melted metal, my scissors somewhere in the ruin. A fire chief, grizzled and red-eyed, trudged over, helmet under his arm, saying, "Arson, no doubt, accelerant all over." I nodded, throat raw, 68 years teaching me to swallow tears, not show them. "Cameras?" I asked, voice hoarse. He shook his head. "None caught it. Streets too dark." I called Jade, dawn breaking grey. "They burned it, baby." Torched the shop. Her silence was thunder, then, "I'm flying in, Mama, Feds'll rip this apart." She landed by noon, suit sharp, eyes sharper, storming the scene with agents in tow, their badges glinting as they combed the ashes. I stood in the wreckage, unbroken, 68 years of steel holding me up, and vowed to rebuild, to rise from. This too. Neighbors rallied, donations piling up, a jar on Mrs. Ellis's stoop overflowing with bills and coins, their voices loud again. "We've got you, Clara." News crews swarmed, cameras rolling as I kicked through debris, apron tied. Over my jeans, defiance loud in every step. "They won't stop me," I told a mic, chin high. "This shop's my heart, I'll bring it back." The story spread, Jade's probe trending, my face on screens again, this time a phoenix, not a fraud. I thought I'd turned it around, thought the fire was their last shot, thought the community's roar would drown their hate. Friday I met with a contractor, sketching a new shop, scissors itching in my hand, ready to cut again. Then at dawn Saturday, a cruiser rolled up slow, Detective Rollins stepping out, his mustache twitching, a smirk curling under it. He handed me a notice, paper crisp, city seal glaring. "Business license revoked," he said, voice flat. "Safety. Risks. Too many incidents." I stared, 68 years flashing, the drug bust, the vandalism, now this. Each hit a brick in their wall. "You did this," I said, crumpling the paper. "You burned it. You're burying me." He shrugged, eyes glinting. "Prove it, old lady." I watched him drive off, the notice shaking in my fist. Jade's voice in my head promising war, but my gut sank, deeper than the flames had cut. The shop was ash now, sure, but this was a knife to its ghost, a legal chokehold I couldn't dodge with grit alone. I'd stood in the wreckage Thursday, vowing to rise, and they'd waited, watched, then struck again, harder, smarter, stripping my right to rebuild before the smoke even cleared. 68 years, and I'd never felt this trapped, never seen hate twist this tight, this fast. Jade flew in, feds swarming, but Rollins's smirk lingered, a promise they weren't done, a shadow growing darker. I kicked a charred beam, ash, puffing around my boots, and thought of that note. You'll pay. Now a prophecy I couldn't outrun. The community cheered, news spun my fight, but this notice, this revocation, it was their real blow, the one that didn't need fire to destroy me. I thought I'd weathered it, thought the flames were the end, but they weren't. They were a beginning, a spark for something colder, something I couldn't fight with scissors or spirit. Drop a comment with number 1 if you think Clara's unbreakable even now. Hit like if this gut punch from Rollins has you raging, and subscribe because this war's about to explode. Can Jade's feds outmatch a system rigged to crush her mama's dreams? The ashes of Thompson's cuts still smoked in my mind Saturday night, that city notice revoking my license, a noose tightening around my neck. But I wouldn't break, not after 68 years of clawing through worse. Jade's feds swarmed. Atlanta, their black SUVs a promise of justice, and Sunday, she called, voice sharp with triumph. Mama, we traced the accelerant hardware store 10 miles out, Clark's talking. I exhaled, standing on my porch, the swing creaking under me, 68 years of weight shifting as hope flickered. Monday we sued the city, Jade's legal team a machine, filing papers thick with outrage, claiming harassment, arson, retaliation. By Wednesday, headlines screamed victory, a settlement landed, $200,000 wired to my name, a judge's gavel slamming down on Rollins's smirk, or so I thought. I leased a new spot Thursday, a squat brick box 2 blocks from Peachtree, smaller but mine, scissors itching in my hand, ready to cut again, to rebuild from ash. Friday I signed the papers, ink wet, my chest swelling, 68 years of fight roaring back, Jade beside me saying, "They can't stop us, Mama." I pictured the new shop, chairs lined up, mirrors gleaming, the hum of clippers drowning out the past month's hell. Saturday I walked the empty space, boots echoing, planning where the counter'd go, where I'd hang a new license once Jade crushed that revocation. I thought I'd flipped it, thought the money, the lease, Jade's, fire had beaten them, thought I'd dance on their ashes like they'd burned mine. Then Sunday hit 3 p.m., and my world cracked again, louder, uglier. I was home sipping tea, the mug warm against my palms, when sirens wailed close, too close, red and blue flashing through my curtains. A battering ram splintered my front, door wood flying, and a SWAT team stormed in. Black gear, rifles up, shouting, "Clara Thompson, hands where we see 'em." I dropped the mug, tea pooling on the floor. 68 years no match for the shock freezing my veins. "What's this?" I yelled, hands up, apron still tied from sweeping the new spot. A captain, face hidden behind a visor, barked, "Arson! Your shop evidence says you lit it." I laughed wild and raw. "Me, I burned my own life." They didn't answer, just cuffed me, metal colder than the cell last time, dragging me out past neighbors gaping from lawns, phones filming, my boots slipping in spilled tea. At the station, Rollins waited, mustache twitching, eyes glinting, like a cat with a mouse. "Got you," he said, sliding a tablet across the table, a grainy video playing. Me at a gas station 10 miles out, buying cans of gas, time-stamped the night of the fire. "That's not me," I said, voice steady. "You faked it, doctored it, I was home asleep." He smirked, leaning back. "Tell it to the judge." Jade burst in hours later, suit rumpled, fury blazing, slamming the table. "This is war, Rollins. That video's garbage." She dug into it, found glitches, timestamps off. A clerk who swore I'd never been there, but this time the charges stuck. Arraignment set, bail sky high. She paid it, 50,000 pulled from her own pocket, and I walked out Monday, wrists raw, head high, fists clenched, vowing to fight this lie too. They're desperate, Jade said, arm around me. We'll bury them. I nodded, 68 years of steel holding me up, and Tuesday I went back to the new spot, sweeping dust, scissors swinging, sure we'd rip their frame-up apart. I cut ahead that day, old man Harold again, his cane tapping, saying, "You're tougher than they think, Clara." I smiled tight, thinking he was right, thinking Jade's war cry would shred their video, their case, their hate. Then Wednesday morning hit, and my phone rang, Bank's name flashing, a voice cold on the line. "Miss Thompson, your accounts are frozen, federal order, pending investigation." I sank onto my porch swing, 68 years crashing down. The settlement, my savings, 200,000 plus 40 years of hustle, gone, locked away overnight. "Frozen?" I whispered. "How?" The voice droned. "Fraud probe, arson profits. We can't say more." I hung up, hands shaking. The new lease papers crumpled in my lap. Rent due in days, no cash to pay it. Jade called, voice tight. "It's them, Mama. Tying the frame up to your money, I'll fix it." I nodded, though she couldn't see, but my gut sank, deeper than the cuffs, the fire, the notice. This was a gut punch I couldn't dodge. I'd sued, won, leased a new start, and they'd waited, watched, then struck, harder, smarter, pinning me as the arsonist, stripping my means to fight back. 68 years, and I'd never been this broke. Never felt the system twist this tight, this fast. I stood in the new spot Thursday, empty. No chairs yet, no mirrors, just echoes and dust. Scissors cold in my hand. Jade's feds traced the video. Found a tech who'd spliced it, but the freeze held. My account's a vault I couldn't crack. I thought I'd flipped it. Thought the settlement was my lifeline, but it was their bait. A trap to paint me guilty. To drain me dry. Rollins's smirk flashed. His "prove it," a taunt I couldn't answer. Not yet. I kicked a wall, plaster puffing, and thought of that brick, that note. "You'll pay." Now a chokehold I couldn't shake. The shop was ash. The new one, a dream, and now my money, my fight, locked away by men who'd rather see me starve than stand. Jade roared, "This is war, but war needs weapons," and mine were gone, snatched in a night. I thought I'd dodged their bullet, thought the lawsuit had won, but this was their real hit, the one that didn't need flames to burn me down. 68 years, and I stood broke, framed, defiant, waiting for the next blow, knowing it'd land heavier, knowing they'd never let me rise. My account's frozen, my new shop a hollow shell. I stood Thursday night on my porch, 68 years of fight trembling in my fists, the Atlanta dusk wrapping me in a quiet that felt like defeat. Jade's feds were clawing at the frame-up, her voice a lifeline through the phone. "Mama, we'll crack this, I swear." But $200,000 locked away left me raw, rent due, no scissors cutting, just echoes in a space I couldn't fill. Friday I walked the 2 blocks to that leased spot, boots scuffing pavement, apron slung over my shoulder, refusing to let Rollins's smirk, Grant's hate, or that doctored video bury me. I'd beaten worse, I told myself, 68 years of Jim Crow redlining, fists on picket lines, and I'd beat this too. Saturday I called my regulars, voice steady. "Rally with me, we'll show 'em I'm still here." They answered, Reggie first. "We've got your back, Clara." Then Harold, Mrs. Ellis, a dozen more, their words a spark reigniting my fire. Sunday, we marched, 50 strong, signs sharpied with "Clara's innocent" and "Justice now," voices roaring outside the precinct, 2 blocks from the ashes of Thompson's cuts. I led them head high, 68 years in every step, fists raised, the crowd a shield I'd built over decades, neighbors who'd sat in my chairs, laughed. At my stories, trusted my hands. Jade called mid-chant, "Mama, video's debunked, tech confessed, charges are teetering." I grinned, sweat beading, thinking this was it, the tide turning again, my people lifting me when the system tried to crush me. Monday, the rally grew. News vans rolling in, cameras catching our signs, my face, the precinct's stone walls glaring back. I took a megaphone, voice booming. "They burned my shop, framed me, froze my money, but I'm still standing." The crowd erupted, clapping, shouting, a wall of sound I thought unbreakable. Marcus, my oldest friend, 69, grizzled and bow-legged, pushed through, his baritone cutting in. "Give me that, Clara. I've got something to say." I handed it over, smiling. 40 years of trust in his eyes, him and me side by side. Since Montgomery, dodging tear gas, sharing coffee on cold nights. He raised the megaphone, crowd hushing, and I waited, expecting fire, expecting him to roar for me like always. Then his voice dropped, slow and heavy. Clara's been lying to us, using us, playing victim while we bleed. My breath stopped, 68 years crashing, the megaphone amplifying each word like a hammer. She torched her own shop, he said, cashed in, leaned on her fancy daughter, and we're the fools holding signs. The crowd shifted, murmurs rippling, eyes darting to me, some narrowing, some confused. I lunged. "Marcus, what are you saying?" But he turned away. Megaphone down, his back a wall I couldn't breach. "Heard it straight," he said, loud without the mic. "She's been playing us for years." I stood frozen, 68 years of steel cracking, my oldest friend, my brother, spitting lies I couldn't fathom. Jade's call echoed, charges. Teetering, but this cut deeper. This wasn't Rollins, wasn't Grant, this was mine turning on me. Tuesday I dug, found out Marcus had met Rollins days before. A fat envelope passed in a diner, his loyalty sold for cash I couldn't match. The crowd splintered, half booing me, "Fraud," echoing off brick, the other half muttering, unsure, drifting away. Wednesday I reopened the new spot, bare bones, one chair borrowed, scissors trembling in my hand, but no one came, not Reggie, not Harold, the street silent. Thursday night, rocks crashed through the new windows, thuds loud in the empty dark, glass shattering from hands I'd once shaken, faces I'd fed at cookouts. I swept up alone, 68 years of trust bleeding out, Marcus's voice a ghost, in my ears, using us. Jade stormed in Friday, livid. "He's a traitor, Mama, we'll expose him." But the damage was done, my shield gone, my people split, my shop a target again. I cut one head that day, a stranger passing through, his tip small, his eyes avoiding mine. Saturday I stood in the wreckage, broom still, apron stained, the betrayal sharper than the fire, the cuffs, the freeze, a knife from my own turned by men who'd never let me win. I'd rallied them, thought they'd lift me, thought Jade's proof would seal it, but Marcus flipped it, sold me out, and half my world followed. 68 years, and I'd never felt this alone, never seen my own hands turn to claws against me. Jade swore revenge, feds circling Marcus now, but the rocks, the booze, the silence, they hit harder, deeper, a wound I couldn't stitch. I thought I'd flipped it, thought the rally was my strength, but it was their trap, a stage for Marcus to break me where badges couldn't. The new shop breathed, barely, but my heart didn't, not with my people gone, not with their stones, at my feet. I swept glass, 68 years heavy, waiting for Jade's next move, knowing the war wasn't just outside anymore, it was here, in the faces I'd loved. Drop a comment with number 1 if you think Marcus's betrayal cuts too deep to forgive. Hit like if Clara's fight against her own stings your soul, and subscribe because this storm's brewing darker. What happens when the hands that held you up start tearing you down? Marcus's betrayal left me hollow, 68 years of trust shattered by his voice, and the rocks that followed. My new shop's windows jagged wounds in a space I'd barely breathed life into. Friday night, I swept glass alone, broom scraping. Concrete, the Atlanta air thick with a silence that pressed on my chest. Jade's promise to expose him, the only thread keeping me stitched. Saturday she moved fast, feds raiding Marcus's house, finding the envelope, his confession spilling under pressure. Arrests snapping cuffs on 2 of Rollins's lackeys who'd passed the cash. Sunday, I reopened. One chair, no mirrors, scissors. Trembling but cutting. A stranger's fade my first in days, his tip small but real. Jade called, voice steady. "Mama, Marcus is done, we've got proof, they're crumbling." I exhaled, 68 years of steel flexing, thinking maybe this was the turn, maybe the tide finally shifting. Monday, I cut 3 heads. Harold. Back cane tapping, saying, "We were wrong, Clara, I'm sorry." His eyes soft with shame. I nodded, throat tight, and kept snipping, the shop limping but alive, a pulse I could feel again. Tuesday, news vans rolled in, cameras catching my hands, my defiance. "Clara Thompson rises," they said, Jade's feds trending, Marcus's fall a footnote. I thought I'd survived the worst, thought the fire, the frame-up, the betrayal were their last shots. Thought 68 years had taught me how to outlast. Wednesday evening hit, dusk painting Peachtree purple, and I locked up, apron slung over my shoulder, walking home 3 blocks, my wrecked car still useless, the settlement frozen, my boots tapping a rhythm of grit. I crossed Juniper, streetlights, flickering, the night cool against my skin, when a roar split the quiet, a truck engine gunning loud, headlights blinding me from the left. I turned, 68 years no match for the instinct kicking in, and saw it, a black pickup barreling straight, tires screaming, no swerve, no brake, just intent. I dove, body slamming pavement, elbows scraping raw, the truck's bumper missing me by inches, wind whipping my hair as it roared past. I rolled, gasping, asphalt biting my palms, watching taillights vanish, no plates, no trace, just exhaust and silence swallowing the street. My heart pounded, loud and wild, 68 years flashing, fire, cuffs, rocks, now this. A hit meant to end me. I staggered up, knees wobbly, blood trickling from a gash on my arm, neighbors peeking from curtains but no one running out, no one calling it in. I limped home, 3 blocks feeling like 30, scissors digging into my hip, the porch, swing creaking as I sank down, breath ragged. Jade answered on the first ring. "Mama, what's wrong?" I told her, voice shaking. "Truck tried to run me down, baby, right on Juniper." Her silence was a storm. Then, "You're moving, safe house. Now I'll nail the driver." I argued, 68 years of stubbornness flaring. "I'm not hiding, I'm cutting tomorrow." She relented, grudging. "Guards then, Mama, I'm not losing you." Thursday I walked back, head high, scissors swinging, 2 feds trailing me, their suits stiff, eyes sharp, the shop opening under their watch. I cut hair, 5 heads, Reggie back saying, "You're a warrior, Clara," his fade tight, his grip firm on my shoulder. I smiled, thin but real, thinking Jade's net was closing, thinking I'd dodged death, thinking 68 years meant I could take anything. Then, mid-cut, Rollins strolled by, slow and deliberate, his cruiser idling outside, mustache twitching, eyes locking on mine through the jagged window frame. He stopped, leaned close, breath fogging the glass, and whispered, "Next time, we won't miss." My scissors froze, 68 years of steel trembling, his words a blade sharper than the truck's roar, a promise colder than the cuffs, the fire, the betrayal. He grinned, teeth glinting, and walked off, cruiser rumbling away, leaving me, staring, clippers humming in my grip, Reggie's head half done. The feds tensed, one stepping out, radio crackling, but Rollins was gone, a ghost with a threat I couldn't unhear. I finished the fade, hands steady though my gut churned, 68 years teaching me to mask fear, not feel it. Jade called, livid. "He's taunting us, Mama. We'll trace that truck. He's finished." I nodded, though she couldn't see, but my mind spun. Rollins's whisper louder than the engine, sharper than Marcus's lies. I'd survived the hit, reopened, brought Reggie back, thought Jade's guards were my shield, but this wasn't. A bluff, this was a vow, a line drawn in my blood. 68 years and I'd never felt death this close, never seen hate this bold, this personal. The shop breathed, scissors snipped, feds stood watch, but Rollins's grin lingered, a shadow I couldn't outrun, a promise they'd strike again, harder, deadlier. I thought I'd turned it, thought Marcus's fall, the shop's pulse, meant I'd won, but that truck, that whisper, they flipped it, turned survival into a countdown. Jade moved mountains, feds circled, but Rollins's words stuck. Next time, a clock ticking I couldn't stop. I locked up Thursday, guards flanking me, streetlights buzzing, and walked home, 3 blocks heavy, scissors in my pocket, knowing the war wasn't just about my shop anymore. It was about my life, knowing they'd never let me stand. 68 years, and I stood battered, breathing, waiting, knowing the next hit wasn't a maybe. It was a when, knowing Rollins meant every word, knowing I'd fight anyway. Rollins's whisper, "Next time we won't miss," hung over me like a storm cloud Thursday night. 68 years of steel trembling as I locked up the new shop, feds flanking me, their radios crackling in the Atlanta dusk, my scissors a cold weight in my pocket. I walked home, 3 blocks under their watch, boots tapping pavement, the truck's roar still echoing in my skull, blood from that scrape crusted on my arm, a badge of survival I couldn't shake. Jade didn't sleep. Her voice a whip through. The phone, "Mama, I'm done playing, they're finished." Friday she unleashed hell, feds swarming the precinct like locusts, black suits and badges flooding Peachtree, tearing through files, grilling cops, their net tightening around the E, men who'd torched my life. Saturday word broke. Grant and Tate hauled out in cuffs, caught on camera rigging that truck hit, their faces pale, buzzcut and twitchy, no match for Jade's fury. Rollins vanished, a ghost slipping the noose, but Jade's team traced the truck. A rental tied to Grant's cousin, case airtight, headlines screaming, "Corrupt cops down, Clara vindicated." Sunday I cut hair under guard, 5 heads, then 10. Reggie back Harold too, their chairs creaking, voices loud. "You did it, Clara, they're gone." I grinned, 68 years curling my lips, scissors dancing over scalps, the shop pulsing. Again? News vans parked outside chanting my name, Clara Thompson unbroken. Jade called, "Mama, we've got 'em, feds are cleaning house," her voice steady. A general mid-battle. I thought it was over. Thought the arrests, the guards, the cameras meant I'd won. Thought 68 years had finally bent the world, my way. Monday I walked to the shop, head high, apron crisp, feds trailing, their suits less stiff now, one nodding, "You're safe, ma'am." I cut 15 heads, shop buzzing, laughter spilling, Mrs. Ellis bringing pie saying, "We're back, Clara, all of us." I smiled, wide and real, thinking the truck, the fire, Marcus's lies were ash now, thinking Jade's crackdown had crushed their spine. Tuesday morning hit, sun barely up, and I stepped outside, 68 years in my stride, fetching mail. From the box by my porch, the swing still creaking from last night's sight. A pop cracked the air, sharp and close. Then a blast, heat slamming me back, shrapnel slicing my arm, my scream lost in the roar as the mailbox erupted, a pipe bomb shredding metal, splinters flying. I hit the ground, ears ringing, blood hot. On my sleeve, 68 years no match for the shock locking my limbs. Neighbors yelled, feds sprinted from their post, radios blaring, "Explosion, suspect active." I crawled, gasping, pavement rough under my palms, staring at the smoking crater where my mail had been, a jagged hole mocking my win. Jade's voice cut through, phone pressed to my ear. "Mama, what happened?" I choked, "Bomb, baby." My porch, and she cursed low and fierce, "Rollins, he's off grid, I'm doubling down." Feds swarmed, cordoning the block, their suits stained with soot, tracing fragments, finding a timer, a signature. Rollins's handiwork, his allies still lurking. Jade shut the shop, guards tripled, 6 now, their eyes darting, guns out, my. New space of fortress I didn't want. I sat inside Wednesday, arm bandaged, blood seeping through gauze, scissors untouched, staring at the stain on my sleeve, 68 years heavy in my chest. Jade flew in, suit wrinkled, eyes wild. "Mama, we'll find him, he's got help, but we'll end this." I nodded, throat dry, but my gut sank, deeper than the truck's roar, the fire's heat, Marcus's words. This was personal, this was death mailed to my door. I'd cut hair Monday, grinned at news vans, thought Grant and Tate's cuffs were the finish line, thought Jade's feds had broken their back. Rollins waited, watched, struck, when I breathed easy. A bomb to prove next time wasn't empty. A hit to show their reach stretched beyond bars, beyond badges. 68 years, and I'd never felt this hunted, never seen hate this patient, this bold. The shop shut, feds circled, neighbors peered from windows, but no one came, no pie, no laughter, just silence and guns. Jade traced it, found a burner phone linked to Rollins, his crew still free, still raging, my safety a lie I couldn't live. I sat, bandage itching, 68 years of fight flickering, the shop's pulse dead again, guards a cage I couldn't escape. Rollins's grin flashed, his whisper real now. "We won't miss." A vow carved in shrapnel, a promise they'd hit again, deadlier, smarter. I thought I'd won, thought the arrests were my shield, but this bomb, this blood flipped it, turned triumph into a target on my back. Jade's feds hunted, precinct gutted, but Rollins's shadow grew, his allies a web I couldn't see, couldn't cut. 68 years and I sat wounded, defiant, waiting. knowing the war wasn't won, knowing they'd never stop, knowing the next strike was coming, bigger, closer. The shop was a fortress. I was alive. But that blast, that graze, it screamed. Truth, their hate was endless, their reach unstoppable, and my fight, my life hung by a thread Jade couldn't snap. I stared at the blood, 68 years heavy, and wondered how much more I could take, how much more they'd throw, knowing this wasn't the end, just the edge of something worse. The pipe bomb's echo lingered Wednesday night, 68 years of steel fraying as I sat in the new shop, bandage tight on my arm, blood seeping through, feds pacing outside, their boots a dull thud against the concrete. Jade's voice burned. Through the phone, "Mama, we're hunting Rollins, he's a dead man." But the shop was shut, windows dark, scissors silent on the counter, my fortress a prison under 6 guards' eyes. Thursday. I stared at the stain on my sleeve. Shrapnel's mark, a scream I couldn't voice, 68 years of fight buckling under fire, cuffs, betrayal. Now this, a bomb mailed to my door. I'd survived the truck, the rocks, the frame-up, but this was different. This was death brushing my skin, Rollins's next time, a vow carved in my flesh. Friday, Jade traced the burner, found a hideout, feds raiding a warehouse, coming up empty, Rollins a ghost laughing from the shadows. I sat, guards circling, my new spot a husk, no customers, no hum, just me and the weight, 68 years heavy in my chest. Saturday, I snapped, 68 years boiling over, the bomb, Marcus's lies, the fire, all of it a fist I couldn't dodge anymore. Jade left her gun, a sleek black pistol, on my kitchen table. Friday. "For protection, Mama," she'd said, rushing back to DC, trusting me to stay safe. I stared at it, 68 years of peace warring with rage, then grabbed it, cold metal biting my palm, heavier than my scissors ever felt. I knew where Rollins drank, a dive bar off Ponce, whispers, from old clients slipping through, his haunt when the heat died down. Sunday night I slipped past the feds, apron off, boots quiet, 68 years of stealth from Montgomery marches guiding me, the gun tucked in my waistband, a vow of my own pulsing in my veins. The bar stank of stale beer and sweat, neon flickering, over-peeling paint, a jukebox whining in the corner. Rollins sat at the back alone, mustache twitching over a whiskey glass, his eyes glinting as I walked in, 68 years of hate meeting mine. He grinned, slow and mean. "Old lady with a toy, huh?" I pulled the gun, hand steady, 68 years aiming at his chest, finger trembling on the trigger. "You burned me, framed me, tried to kill me," I said, voice low, raw. "This ends now." He laughed, a dry rasp, leaning back. "You're nothing without her, Clara, nothing but a scared granny." My pulse roared, 68 years flashing, the shop in flames, the bombs blast, Marcus's voice, and I wanted it. Wanted him gone, wanted peace I'd never had. But I froze, 68 years of soul whispering, "This ain't you," and dropped. Dead gun clattering on the sticky floor, my hands empty, shaking. "Not worth it," I said, stepping back. 68 years pulling me out, soul heavy but mine. I turned, walked away, his laugh chasing me. "Run home, coward," loud in the dim. Monday, I sank onto my porch swing, gun back in Jade's case. 68 years aching, the fight drained. Rollins alive, me still here. Jade called, voice tight. "Mama, he's dead, shot last night. His own crew thought he'd snitch." I exhaled, 68 years shifting, relief bitter on my tongue, his blood not on me but gone all the same. Tuesday, I reopened, one chair. Scissors snipping, feds patrolling, Reggie back saying, "Too, you're free now, Clara." His fade tight under my hands. I smiled, thin, thinking maybe he was right. Maybe Rollins's end was my start. Maybe 68 years could rest. Wednesday I cut 5 heads, shop humming soft, feds easing off, news vans fading. My name a whisper of triumph again. I thought I'd reclaimed it. Thought his death, Jade's war, had won. Thought the shop's pulse was mine to keep. Then Thursday hit, dusk settling, and I locked up, stepping into the cool scissors in my pocket, 3 blocks to home. A letter slid under my door. No stamp, no name, just scrawl in black ink. Jade's next. My breath stopped. 68. Years crashing, the paper trembling in my grip. My daughter, my rock, now their target, a threat sharper than the bomb. The truck, Rollins's grin. I called her, voice breaking, "Baby, they're coming for you," and she laughed soft. "Mama, I've got this, they can't touch me." But my gut sank. 68 years knowing better. Knowing Rollins' death didn't end it. Knowing his crew, his hate, lived on, smarter, crueler. I stood in the new shop Friday, scissors still, feds back, their radios crackling, Jade's laugh a ghost in my ears, the letter burning my pocket. I'd snapped, faced Rollins, dropped the gun, thought his blood closed it, thought I'd won, my life back. But this flipped it, turned my war into hers, my fight into a shadow over her. The U.S. Attorney General, their new prey. 68 years, and I'd never felt this helpless, never seen hate stretch this far, this fast. The shop breathed, I breathed, but that letter, that vow, it screamed truth. Their reach wasn't broken. It was shifting, aiming higher, deadlier. Jade swore she'd handle it. Feds swarmed again, but my hands shook. 68 years heavy, knowing the war wasn't mine alone anymore, knowing they'd never stop, knowing my daughter's fight was just beginning. I sat, letter crumpled, scissors cold, waiting, dreading, the shop's hum a lie, the peace I'd chased a trap, and Jade, my Jade, now the bullseye I couldn't shield. That letter, Jade's next, burned a hole in my pocket Thursday night. 68 years of steel buckling as I stood in my kitchen, scissors still on the counter, the Atlanta air thick with a dread I couldn't shake. Jade's laugh over the phone, "Mama, I've got this," echoed hollow. Her confidence a shield I prayed could hold, but 68 years taught me hate like this didn't bend, didn't break. It just found new throats to choke. Friday, she ramped up, feds, swarming Atlanta again. Their black SUVs a swarm, precinct gutted, every cop who'd smirked at me grilled, their files torn open like raw wounds. I sat in the new shop, one chair creaking, cutting Reggie's fade, his voice soft. "She'll be fine, Clara, she's too big to touch." But my hands trembled. 68 years knowing better. Knowing Rollins's death wasn't the end, just a shift, a shadow stretching toward my daughter. The U.S. Attorney General, my rock, now their bullseye. Saturday I cut 10 heads, shop humming, feds patrolling outside, their radios a low buzz, my scissors snipping a rhythm of defiance, 68 years pushing me to stand, to breathe, to believe Jade's net would catch them all. Sunday, news. Vans rolled back, cameras catching my steady hands. Clara Thompson unbroken, trending again, Jade's crackdown a tidal wave, headlines screaming, "Corrupt cops fall, feds clean house." I grinned, thin but real, thinking maybe this was it. Maybe Rollins's crew was crumbling. Maybe 68 years could rest. Monday. I walked to the shop, apron crisp, 3 blocks under a dawn sky, feds trailing, their nods sharp. "We've got leads, ma'am." They're running scared. I cut 15 heads. Mrs. Ellis back with pie, Harold's cane tapping, the shop pulsing, a heartbeat I'd clawed back from ash, from bombs, from betrayal. "Tuesday," Jade called, voice steady. "Mama, we've got names, Rollins's allies, low lifes." He ran with, they're cornered. I exhaled, 68 years easing, thinking her power, her fire was enough, thinking the letter was a bluff, a last gasp from men with no moves left. Wednesday. I stood in the shop, scissors dancing, 20 heads done, the hum louder, neighbors trickling in, their smiles soft. "You're winning, Clara," echoing off bare walls. I thought I'd reclaimed it, thought Jade's feds, the shop's pulse, my grit had flipped it, thought 68 years had finally bent the world my way. Then Thursday hit, noon sharp, and my phone rang, a DC number, Jade's aide, voice. "Cracking. Mrs. Thompson, it's Jade, her motorcade, crash, brakes cut." My scissors clattered, 68 years crashing, the shop spinning as I gripped the counter, breath gone. "Is she alive?" He choked. "Yes. Barely hospital. Now critical." I ran, feds scrambling, their SUVs roaring, 3 hours to DC, 68 years no match for the terror clawing my chest, my daughter, my Jade, bleeding somewhere I couldn't reach. I burst into the hospital, antiseptic stinging my nose. Feds. Parting, Jade's room a fortress, tubes snaking from her arms, her suit shredded, eyes closed, chest rising slow. I sank beside her, 68 years sobbing, hands clutching hers. "Baby, hold on, Mama's here." She stirred. Friday dawn, eyes fluttering, voice a whisper. "Mama, it's Vickers." My breath stopped, 68 years reeling. Vickers. The news anchor who'd smeared me, his slick hair, sharp tongue flashing. A fraud using her daughter's power. Jade coughed, blood flecking her lips. He's behind it all, cops, fire, bomb, everything. I froze, 68 years piecing it, Vickers. Not just a mouthpiece, a kingpin, bankrolling Grant, Tate, Rollins, a media titan shielding a racist empire, his hit piece the first shot in a war I didn't see. Jade's feds swarmed Saturday, raiding Vickers's mansion, his station, finding ledgers, payoffs, a trail from my shop's ashes to his polished desk. But he'd vanished, a ghost slipping their net, untouchable, gone. Sunday, Jade lived. Stable, her eyes sharp again, voice weak. "We'll get him, Mama." But my gut sank, 68 years, knowing he'd outrun us, knowing his reach was deeper, darker than we'd guessed. Monday I sat by her bed, scissors in my lap, 68 years heavy. The feds gutting his empire, arrests piling. Grant's cousin, Rollins's crew, but Vickers, the head, free, a shadow laughing from somewhere we couldn't touch. Tuesday I drove back. Jade's guards tripled, her voice echoing, "I'll heal, Mama, we'll fight." But the letter, Jade's next, was prophecy, his blade, his win. Wednesday, I reopened, Atlanta quiet, shop humming, 30 heads. Kurt Reggie saying, "You're a legend, Clara." His fade tight, Mrs. Ellis baking again, the shop thriving. A phoenix I'd clawed from ruin. Thursday, news ran it. Vickers exposed, Clara's victory. My face everywhere, 68 years a banner, but his absence gnawed, a hole justice couldn't fill. Friday, I stood in the shop, scissors snipping, 40 heads, the hum loud. Feds easing off, Jade healing, her voice strong. "We'll find him, Mama, I swear." I nodded, 68 years believing her. But every snip echoed his threat. This isn't over. A whisper I couldn't unhear, sharper than Rollins's, deadlier than the bomb. Saturday, I cut 50 heads, shop packed, neighbors laughing. Signs up Clara's back, my name a roar again. 68 years standing tall, victorious, unbroken. Sunday I walked home, 3 blocks, dusk cool, scissors swinging, the shop thriving, Jade alive, feds circling, but Vickers's shadow lingered. His escape a taunt, a promise they'd strike again, smarter, quieter. Monday I sat on my porch, swing creaking, 68 years heavy. The shop's hum a balm, Jade's fight a fire. But his name, Vickers, a weight I couldn't lift, a kingpin free, his empire cracked but not crushed. Tuesday, I cut 60 heads. Shop bursting, every chair full, Atlanta mine again. 68 years a crown, but his grin, his voice flashed. A ghost I couldn't kill. Wednesday, Jade called out of the hospital. "Mama, we're close," he's slipping, her voice steel, but my gut twisted. 68 years knowing close wasn't caught, knowing he'd watched, waited, struck her to break me. Thursday, I stood in the shop, scissors flying, 70 heads, the hum deafening. My name a chant, justice bent, not broken, 68 years a shield. But Vickers's threat hung. This isn't over. A vow beyond Rollins, beyond the precinct, a media. King's checkmate I couldn't dodge. Friday I walked the floor, apron crisp, 80 heads cut, shop a fortress. Jade back in DC, feds hunting, my victory loud. 68 years roaring, but his shadow stretched, untouchable, a blade poised I couldn't see. Saturday, I sat. Scissors, still. 90 heads done, Atlanta alive with my fight. Jade's voice echoing, "We'll win, Mama." But 68 years whispered truth. Vickers was the war, the fire, the bomb, the letter, a puppeteer I'd missed. His escape my scar. Sunday I stood outside. Dusk purple, shop glowing. 100 heads cut, 68 years a legend. Triumphant, thriving. But every snip, every laugh, carried his echo. This isn't over. A promised justice couldn't snap. A kingpin free. A war unfinished. Monday I cut again, shop packed, Jade healing, feds closing. 68 years unbowed. But Vicars's name burned, his flight a wound, my victory loud, my peace a lie, 68 years standing, haunted, knowing he'd strike. Again, knowing the ending wasn't mine to write. Clara Thompson's journey is a raw testament to resilience against systemic racism, revealing lessons etched in 68 years of unwavering fight. First, it underscores the power of perseverance. Clara faced harassment, arson, betrayal, and near death, yet she kept standing, her scissors a symbol of defiance against odds stacked high. Her story teaches that strength isn't just surviving blows, it's rising each time they land harder. Second, it exposes the depth of institutional hate. From cops like Grant and Tate to media titan Vickers, racism wasn't a lone act, but a network, manipulating laws, communities, and narratives to crush one woman's spirit. It's a stark reminder that justice often battles more than individuals. It wars with systems. Third, family as a lifeline shines through. Jade's role as U.S. Attorney General wasn't just power, it was love. A daughter's fierce shield against her mother's tormentors, proving bonds can defy even the ugliest assaults. Fourth, betrayal's sting cuts deepest when it's personal. Marcus's turn showed how racism exploits trust, turning allies into weapons, a wound Clara bore with grace. Finally, victory can be hollow. Clara rebuilt, thrived, but Vickers's escape left a shadow, teaching that justice bends, rarely breaks, and the fight persists beyond the win. So what's your take? Drop a comment. Should Clara's resilience inspire us to push harder against injustice? Hit like if her story fuels your fire, subscribe for more tales of grit, and share to spread her legacy. Thanks for walking this road with us. Here's to courage that outlasts hate.